So the question was asked in a previous video, how did I buy my rental property? So we're going to discuss that today. Well, good morning everyone. Today's video is a little bit different. Someone had asked in the comments section how I obtained my rental property, so I wanted to walk you guys through a few things. And this is pretty good timing because I'm on my way there right now just to check over a couple of things. We're having some work done to it in preparation for the next tenant moving in over the next week. So wanted to discuss it. And first off, a disclaimer. Anything I say today is in no way financial advice or investing advice for anyone else. Honestly, what I've done over the years, much of what I've done financially has bombed, and much of what I've done has been all right. So this is just a video that came about because of a suggestion by one of my subscribers on a previous video in the comments section asking how I obtained my rental property. And contrary to popular belief, I did not obtain it by living there and then purchasing another property and keeping that one as a rental. My rental property was purchased specifically as an investment. Now, I don't have a whole lot of money. I'd say anyone that can live in northern Illinois and afford a rental property or whatever is, in worldwide terms, probably wealthy. But for my area, I'm just an average income person. I don't have a large amount of resources to pull from, either income or savings, but I do have a little bit of surplus. And I'm also very cautious when it comes to investing. And so for me, I own one rental property. It's a very small, just a little over 1,000 square foot rental property. And I don't even own it. I co-own it with a friend of mine, and we financed it. So, and we purchased it for a couple of reasons. First, it was a future investment, obviously, and neither he nor I are really big on passive investing, which is just putting money somewhere and letting it sit and slowly grow. Both he and I seem to be drawn toward active investing, which would be to invest in something that you have your hands on, that you can work with, that you can see, something tangible. And there's a number of reasons to do each. Passive investing definitely has its benefits. You're pretty much hands off. You invest money and it grows. The downside is typically passive investing grows slowly and you can still lose money. The one time we did passive investing, we lost the majority of it. So, but we invested, it's a long story. Anyway, so that was at the time when the market was high. It was a lot of reasons behind that. But with active investing, you generally don't lose as much because you're normally putting money into an object or a business or something that you're working in, and you may not make the amount of money you thought, or you could lose some, but you generally aren't going to lose all of it. And the potential rate of return is generally higher with active investing, or it can be. I'm not an investment advisor, so those of you that are on this channel, you might be shaking your head going, this guy's clueless. But I'm just telling you from my personal experience that active investing typically, for me anyway, has had a greater rate of return and lower risk, and the downside, if it does drop, is not as drastic as passive investing can be. The downside to active investing is you have skin in the game. I mean, that's the upside, but it's also a downside. With the rental property, I have to put a lot of work into it, and in my case, my partner has since moved out of state, so I do all the work, and he reimburses me for time. But it's, your hands are on it, you're worried about it, is the tenant taking care of it? All of those things come into play. Now, for us, we started talking, and both he and I wanted to invest in a property. We bought our property back a decade back. You know, real estate was skyrocketing, especially here in Northern Illinois, and we wanted to be part of it. So neither he nor I really had the risk tolerance to do it alone, and so we decided to become partners. We looked at many properties to potentially purchase as a rental, and we quickly, also sidebar, I spent a lot of time speaking with other landlords and investment advisors and that about this, so I learned as much as I could going into it. I also started reading a book on rental properties and you know, what they mean. You know, can you make money at them? You know, what is it about rental properties that are so attractive? What are the downsides? So anyway, but he and I looked at many properties, and what we found was a lot of the properties we looked at appeared to be maintenance headache. Have a basement, and the people would say, oh yeah, you got to make absolutely sure that the sump pump's running because the basement can flood, and we didn't want that. They had complex roof angles, and we knew reshingling that roof would be expensive. So we quickly realized what we wanted was a small ranch house with no basement, ideally on a crawl space, and something with a small garage, or preferably an attached garage, and just minimal bells and whistles. We wanted something really basic that would be easy to rehab and easy to maintain, and that's very, very important. I've since found, since owning this property for 10 years. So eventually we ran across the rental property that we ultimately ended up purchasing. All right, so we're at the rental property now, and I'll show you around. So this is our rental property. Pretty basic little ranch house. Tree that we just had trimmed. It was laying on the roof. Beautiful car in the driveway. And the previous tenants put a small pool in the yard there, so it killed the grass. But so that's it. And so we'll pop back into the car, and I have to run a few errands, and I'll give you guys a quick explanation of what it's like to own and a few of the numbers involved. So we bought this rental property at a time historically when real estate was in the at the bubble stage. So unfortunately, when we purchased it, was right at the peak of the bubble. So we purchased the rental property, and it within a month was worth less than half what we paid for it. Now that's one huge negative that we went through, but that was a decade back, and all the advice that I was given about investing in general, but also specifically purchasing a property like this, was that if you end up having taking a loss like that, the worst thing you could do is sell the property right then, and if at all possible, to hang on to it. So we decided to hang on to it and just tough our way through it. So what happened in our case is, as soon as we purchased the property and the value went down, also the rent market went down, and so we couldn't rent it for as high a dollar amount, and we went with a slightly shorter mortgage term, so our mortgage payment was a little on the high side. Now that for the first several years that we owned it, we were upside down nearly $200 a month in rent versus mortgage payment on a property that was worth tens of thousands of dollars less than we paid for it. It was pretty rough. But we were also told that you really don't lose anything on real estate until you sell it, because, you know, value up and down, the value is what someone will pay for it. And since we chose not to sell it, we hadn't realized that loss yet. Now, in our case, we purchased it as an investment, and we knew that we were going to be in it long term. Well, we've had some good luck and some bad luck with it, and I'll walk you through a little bit of the process in purchasing it, and then some of the bad luck beyond just reduced property value that we've had. And it's not all bad news. We've had some very good, there've been a very good upside to this as well. But so we purchased the property, and like I said, it went down in value. Well, to purchase it, now if you buy a rental property in the way many people purchase them, and I apologize if there's glare from the sun here, I'll be driving in a different direction shortly. But if you purchase, let's say you're living in a property and you decide to move. So you put your property for sale and you buy another property, and then, you know, your first property doesn't sell, so you decide to put a tenant in it. There's some benefits to doing that. One of those is lower interest rate. Another one is it's easier to get a mortgage. And what I mean by that is, when you are purchasing, so let's say you live in a townhouse and you're moving to a freestanding home. So you put your townhouse for sale for $100,000. You want to buy a freestanding home for $150,000. You tell the bank, I'm shopping for another home. My other house is on the market for sale, and they're generally going to want you to sell that house first. But if your credit's good enough and your income is such, they'll write you a second mortgage, and then you put your first house for sale. You wait for it to sell. If it eventually doesn't sell, you put a tenant in the place, and all is right with the world. If you approach a bank and say, I'm purchasing an investment property that's not going to be my primary residence, that is much more difficult, or at least it was in Illinois 10 years ago. Now, it might have changed since then, I don't know. So for those of you that, you know, don't attack me in the comments section and say it's not that way anymore, because it might have changed. But we bought this property a decade back, and back then, when you walked up to a bank and you said, I want to buy a second property as an investment property, as a rental, I mean, they made it hard on you. In fact, I'm going to make an exaggerated statement to prove a point, or demonstrate a point here, and that is to say that you almost have to prove you don't need the mortgage before they'll lend you the money. It's weird. The closing cost fees are higher, and the interest rate is higher. So, and that's one thing that we hadn't considered. The interest rate was 1% higher as a rental property than a primary residence. And we've heard anywhere from 1% to 2% higher, just because a bank knows that, hey, if you're buying an investment property, you can probably afford to pay a little bit more, and you really want that mortgage. And they also feel that if you're making a profit on the property, they want to be part of that, and so they mark up the interest. Also, one thing we didn't know that going into this, so we hadn't factored that in initially. Second thing that we hadn't factored in was homestead exemption on property tax. So we purchased the property, and the property taxes were like $2,300 or $2,400 or something a year. As soon as we bought it as a rental, they instantly went up to $4,100 a year, because the property lost the homestead exemption. Because homestead means that is where you're homesteading. That is where you live, where you and your personal family live. And we lost that tax exemption. So all of a sudden, this property that was supposed to make us a couple $100s a month profit, the rental market went down a couple $100s per month. The cost of ownership, because of increased property taxes and higher mortgage, went up a couple hundred. So before you know it, we were $190 some a month upside down on the property, and it went down in value. So it was a very negative thing. So that's something you guys need to understand. When you buy a rental property, the bank is going to be harder on you to purchase that property than if you were just buying a personal home to live in, and it's going to cost you more than you thought, and the frustration level is going to be high. So now we've had the rental property for 10 years. We've had 2 tenants in the property in the 10 years we've owned it. And so we've lucked out in that we haven't had to re-rent it to somebody every year. That would be terrible. You definitely want, if you have a decent tenant, you want to keep them in there. Now, decent tenant, that's an interesting term that I think we need to define. Both tenants that we've had in the property, we just are signing our 3rd tenant now, who will more than likely be a short-term tenant. But the first 2 tenants we had were in there for 4.5 or 5 years each. And they both started out, they both went in a similar way, and that was each of these 2 tenants started out decent people. The first couple years the rent was on time, they were keeping the property clean, and over time, after a couple years, they started letting the place get run down. They weren't calling me to fix things. They started getting late on the rent, or at least the first one. The second tenant never got late on the rent, but the first one started getting late on the rent. Eventually I had to forgive 1 month rent because it's more expensive to evict somebody than to eat 1 month's rent. And before you know it, they moved out spontaneously and had, I don't want to say trashed the place, but really had not cared for it. I mean, they weren't punching holes in the walls or anything, but it was bad. I mean, we had to gut one of the bathrooms down to the studs because there was water leak that they didn't tell me about, and we had to completely refloor the entire house, new carpet, new tile in the kitchen. The cabinets were filthy, the appliances were destroyed. I mean, it was just, the garage door opener was broken, the garage door tracks were broken, the garage door springs were broken. I mean, every single, light switches were broken, faucets were broken. You name it. If it was a functional system in the house, it didn't work. We had to put a new furnace in. I mean, it was ridiculous. And so I let the people have it, and through a lot of yelling, they basically drained their savings account and gave me, I think it was $1,400, every penny they had to their name, in order to try to appease me. But they had done $15,000 probably of damage to the home. But I knew they didn't have 2 nickels to rub together. They couldn't afford to pay for it, and my partner and I just had to eat it. So we had to completely rehab the house. So now the people that just moved out, when they moved in, we walked them through the situation. We said, look, this is what we went through with our previous tenants. We will not go through that with anyone again. Absolutely not. I mean, we double, triple, quadruple checked references, and we got a huge security deposit, and just, you know, I was very fastidious as a landlord, and just checking on things and correcting every little thing that came about. However, over time, they stopped calling me for things, and the property began to get a little bit run down, and you know, it was, I don't know, it became very frustrating, to say the least. So when they moved out, the carpet was trashed. It's only been 5 years. Trashed carpet. So they paid for new carpet. The entire house needed to be repainted again. All the kitchen tile needs to be replaced again. I mean, it just, light switches were broken, faucet valve, the shower valve was broken, the one faucet in the bathroom was bad, the kitchen faucet was bad, all the kitchen appliances need to be replaced, the garage door opener's broken, the exterior lights don't work. I mean, ridiculous, absolutely ridiculous. And so now I'm having to rehab it again. They've paid for some of it, but I have to eat a lot of it. So I gotta tell you guys, it is a frustrating and difficult proposition. Now on the upside, and I'll probably do another video just on finances, personal finances as a whole, but I can tell you that there are capital losses that you can take that really benefit you from a tax perspective. Also, my daughter had enrolled in college, and because of taking capital losses, it lowered my income and she got more financial aid, and there were a number of things that had snowballed and come into effect that really became a blessing in going through all of these losses with the rental house. So between the tax benefits and tuition benefits from capital losses and that, I've done fine on the property. And now the property value, it's not yet back up where it was when we bought it, but it's getting there. And the principal pay down, we've had the mortgage long enough that the principal pay down is starting to accumulate. And the rental amounts that what we can charge per month, the rental market has gone up in the area. So we're no longer in a loss every month on the rent to mortgage cost. So it is, the property is becoming financially beneficial, and over the next few years, I really think that it can only get better. So that's kind of where we're at with it. I would say that anyone that's considering purchasing a rental property, do your research. Also, buy a place that's very maintenance free. I found that you want to maintain a property well, and you want it to look good for the tenants. But also, if you're in a basic market, you're not renting a high-end home in a wealthy area. If you're just like us, a basic property in a basic town, what you really want to do is make sure that the equipment in the home is basic appliances, relatively inexpensive carpet, inexpensive but durable flooring. Do not use a flat wall paint because you can't clean it. You want semi-gloss or eggshell, something that can be washed easily. Let's see here. We're on a well. We had the water softener sort of custom built to help remove iron from the water. We put a whole house water filter in to remove some of it. And just a lot of things that you have to consider, but maintenance free is what you want in a rental property. So I think that's really about all I want to give you guys today. It's been an awfully long video, I apologize, but there's a lot to it. So if you guys have an interest in knowing more about the financials of my life or whatever, feel free to ask. I am not some millionaire person. I'm just an average Joe living in an average town, but I have learned a few things over the years, a few things not to do financially, and a few things that are beneficial. I plan on doing a video, if you guys would like, on the financials of this car, how I purchased it, what it costs me or doesn't cost me per month. Long story there as well. But the financial side of owning this car, using it for business and that. So go ahead and give me a thumbs up, like and subscribe. If you like this type of video, by all means, go ahead and let me know in the comments section. Anyway, thanks guys. Take it easy.